is hard to think about the Yontif of Pesach without thinking of the theme of family. Family is present around the Seder table. There are grandparents, parents, children, and a Pesach Seder which is missing these components seems to be missing the entire point of what the Seder is meant to accomplish. The Seder is meant to engage in dialogue between generations and to feel the unity around the Seder table no matter what generation one is a part of. I want to start with an insight from the Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim in context is in Parshas Bo, where Paro is finally willing to acquiesce to the requests of Moshe Rabbeinu and to allow the Jewish people to leave Mitzrayim on a short holiday where they will go and serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Midbar. But before he agrees, Paro asks Moshe Rabbeinu one question: Mi v'mi haholchim? Who and who exactly are going to go? And the simple understanding is that Paro just wanted the facts. Who exactly is leaving the land of Mitzrayim? But the Baal HaTurim notes that the numerical value of mi v'mi haholchim is 216. And the exact number 216 is the gematria of Kalev ubin Nun. And he explains that Paro was challenging Moshe with the following issue. Paro understood that if the Jews would leave Mitzrayim and they would go out into the desert, they would be faced with huge challenges, spiritual challenges, physical challenges, challenges that would come ultimately to destroy the very people who fought for their own freedom. And what Paro was saying to Moshe Rabbeinu is, why do you care so much? Why is it worth it? Why are you going to be so bothered to take the Jewish people out of the land of Mitzrayim if eventually what's going to happen is that there's only going to be two people who are going to get to Eretz Yisrael? Mi v'mi haholchim. Who is it that's going already? It's Kalev ubin Nun, the numerical value of 216. Is this entire story worth it for two people? And that challenge that Paro was asking is a deep provocative question that Moshe Rabbeinu, we have to see how he answers the question, because it's a challenge against the entire story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why do we fight so hard and go up against such difficulties to achieve so little? If after all is said and done, it's mi v'mi haholchim, we only have Kalev ubin Nun, just a small two people who are going to enter Eretz Yisrael, then what is the reason that we fight so hard for it? So Moshe Rabbeinu responds, Vayomer Moshe. Moshe says, Binu ureinu uviziknenu nelech. You're making a big mistake, Paro. You think that we're doing this all for Kalev ubin Nun? It's wrong. We are doing this for the next generation and for the older generation. Because, as the Gemara in Baba Basra, Daf Kuf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis tells us, although the decree was made that the Dar HaMidbar would die out, but their children is explicit in the pasuk that they were allowed to enter Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara darshins from the language of milimala, the Gemara expounds that anyone who was above the age of 60 at the time of Chet HaMeraglim also did not perish in the Midbar. They also were allowed to enter into Eretz Yisrael. So Moshe Rabbeinu tells Paro, he says, you're making a mistake. You're looking at Klal Yisrael in the middle generation. You are defining us by the strength and the vitality of where we are now in the age of 20 to 60. And Paro, that's a mistake, because the Jewish people are not built on those between 20 and 60. The Jewish people are built bin areinu v'ziknenu nelech. We are doing this with the future, with the children who are under 20, and we're dealing with the older generation. Anyone who is over 60 now will be allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael. So yes, between the generation that is 20 to 60, there will only be two victories. Only Kalev ubin Nun, only the gematria of mi v'mi haholchim will be allowed to go. But that's a mistake to think that it's not worth it. It only comes from you thinking, Paro, that the Jewish people are 20 to 60. But if you would see the future, and you would see the history of Klal Yisrael, if you would see the children of the next generation, and the Zaydas from the previous generation, and you would see that they will go into Eretz Yisrael, then you'll be able to understand why I'm fighting so hard. And this Baal HaTurim, not only is it a beautiful insight into the response between Paro and Moshe Rabbeinu, it gives us such perspective in the understanding of what we're trying to achieve at the Pesach Seder. Because the truth is that often between parents directly and children, there will be a certain tension. There will be a lack of perfect unity in the present moment, in the generation between parents and children. But if we think of the greater perspective, the forest here, and we think Benureinu Biziknenu Nelech, and we think about the three generations coming together, So then suddenly there's a greater meaning to it all. There's a greater understanding. There's a bigger vision than just the direct communication between parent and child. So we find, I want to share this insight in the name of my grandfather, Rabbi Beryl Wine, a beautiful insight that he has into the language that we find when children ask questions in the Torah and how we relate it to the Arba Banim. We find that there are 3 places in the Torah when children ask questions to their parents and the parents tell them responses about Yetzias Mitzrayim. We have the Rashas, where we tell him that if he was there, he would not have been taken out. This is what God did for me when I left Mitzrayim. There, the Torah does not say specifically what the Rasha is going to ask. It is more directed that you will tell the Rasha, Ba'vur zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeisim b'Mitzrayim. The She'ena Yodea Lishol somehow is incorporated together with the Rasha. It does not get its own question there in the Torah. But there are 2 other times when the Torah discusses questions when a child will ask a parent. One is the tam, and the language that the Torah uses with the tam is ki yisholcha bincha, when your son will ask you, machar, tomorrow, and he will say, mazos, what is this? What is taking place? That is the question of the simple tam. And the language that is used in the pasuk is ki yisholcha bincha machar, when your son will ask you tomorrow, when that will occur. Another place where the Torah uses such language is later on in Parshas Va'eschanan, when it's talking about the Chacham. The pasuk says, Ki yisholcha vincha machar lemar, when your son will ask you tomorrow, saying, Ma ha'edos v'achukim v'hamishpatim asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu eschem. What are all the laws and statutes that Hashem has commanded us to do around the Seder? So 2 times, besides the Rasha, that we find a child asking a parent, what is it that we are doing? The Tam asking Mazos, and the Chacham asking the more of elaborate question, what are all the laws and statutes and mitzvos that we are performing? In both of these contexts, the Torah says, Machar, that the question comes tomorrow. It's not a question that is happening today. It's not in the moment when you're leaving Mitzrayim. It's Machar. It's in the future. It's going to come tomorrow. But we find that in his commentary, Rashi writes different things in Parshas Va'eschanan and in Parshas Bo. In explaining the word machar, Rashi uses different language when he relates to the Chacham than when he relates to the Tam. When he relates to the Chacham, Rashi writes as follows. Machar, says Rashi, yesh machar shehu la'achar zman. That we shouldn't understand that machar means literally tomorrow, the next calendar day. Machar means a distant future. There will come a time when the question will be posed from the Chacham, what is it that you are engaged in? Machar should not be understood on a literal level. It's not tomorrow, the calendar day, but rather the distant future. In Rashi and Parshas Bo, it's a very similar point that Rashi makes, but the language is subtly different. Rashi writes, Yesh machar shehu achshav. There are times when the machar is now, meaning the literal tomorrow. V'yesh machar shehu la'achar zman. And there also is a tomorrow which will come in a future time, not literally tomorrow. And my grandfather was bothered by this diuk. He says, why is it that in the Tam, Rashi writes, Yesh machar shehu achshav, v'yesh machar shehu la'achar zman. But in regards to the Chacham's question, Rashi just simply writes, Yesh machar shehu la'achar zman, that there's going to be a distant future. It would seem as if when we relate to the Chacham, the machar is only distant, but when we relate to the Tam, then the machar is both literal and also non-literal in the sense that it can be in the future. And, as noted, with the Rasha's question and She'enu Yodea Lishol's question, there is no time where it says machar in the Torah. The Torah only tells you this is what you should say. It does not prompt it with a question that comes machar. So to summarize, by the Rasha and She'enu Yodea Lishol, there is no question that comes tomorrow. There is just a response that is given to him. By the Tam, when he asks you machar tomorrow, Rashi's comment is, there is a tomorrow which is literal, and there is a tomorrow which is distant. By the Chacham, the only comment that we have is that there is a tomorrow which is distant. And my grandfather explained that what is taking place here is an understanding of the different perspectives that the Rasha, Tam, and Chacham have on Judaism and Jewish history in specific. The Rasha does not see a tomorrow. The wicked man, the perspective of the Rasha is that we are where we are right now. We live in the moment that we live in. And there is nothing more that we need to know. That is exactly all about Esav HaRasha. Why do I need the Bechor? Esav asks. He challenges. Lama zeli Bechora. Hine enochi lo olech lamus. What is the future? What does it hold for me? I do not know. But give me what I can get for today. And that is a perspective of Rishus, because it doesn't see that it's worth building for the today of tomorrow. That's Rasha. So there's no machar at all. So instead we tell the Rasha very strongly that there's no Yetzias Mitzrayim for you. Because Yetzias Mitzrayim is built upon its perspective. It's built upon the forest. It's built upon the entire totality of Judaism. And unless you can see a past, and unless you can see a future, so then there's no Yetzias Mitzrayim. There's no point of it all. So that's Paro. Miva mi'aholchim. Who's going already? What are you doing this for? The present generation of Klal Yisrael, that's only Kalev who bin Nun who are going to go. So the whole thing is not worth it. Miva mi'aholchim. Who's going to do it at all? That's the Rasha. When it comes time to the Tam tries to have a little bit of both. The Tam, on the one hand, does live in the moment. Just like the Rasha, he can't get past the literal tomorrow. He sees that tomorrow is tomorrow and that's it. He has that side of him. On the other hand, the Tam gets it a little bit more. The Tam understands that there's also a machar that's coming in the distant future. He sees both. He wants to be poseach al shnei hasiifim. He wants to have it all. He wants to have the moment and the present, but in the future he wants and sees that he wants a part of that as well. So we tolerate that. It's not on the highest level, but we tolerate such a perspective. Yesh machar shu achshav, yesh machar shu la'achar zman. And that's the idea of incorporating the Tam at the Seder table. However, when it comes to the Chacham, the wise man, as we define is El Chacham Haroes Hanolad, that to be able to have wisdom, you have to be able to envision and see what's going to come. So the Chacham's question has a completely different meaning. When he asks you tomorrow, so he's asking you about a distant future, because he gauges what exists today by what will come of it. It doesn't matter how hard it seems right now. It doesn't matter that Miva Mi'aholchim seems bleak, and we're only dealing with two people who are going to get to Eretz Yisrael. But the Chacham gets it. He sees much more. He sees a future built upon a past, B'nureinu b'zikneinu nelech. And based upon that, he's able to ask the question with a greater machar, a machar that only sees that what's going to matter is tomorrow. And that pretty much sums up the same insight of Miva Mi'aholchim of the Baal HaTurim, pretty much sums up the difference in the subtlety between the machars that engage these four sons. Just as Paro cannot see towards the future, he only looks at Klal Yisrael as a generation between 20 and 60, and there's nothing else. So that is Klal Yisrael. So to him, he can't see what is motivating Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the Rasha. The Rasha doesn't have a machar. He has no concept of a tomorrow. So we give him a forceful response. So then you're in the same boat as Paro. If you don't see the future, so then there's no point of it. With the Tam, it's moderate. It's a little bit of both. Yesh machar shu achshav, yesh machar shu la'achar zman. He's stuck a little bit in the present, but at least he understands that there is a future and we have what to work with him. But the ultimate, the highest level that we want is that the machar is only la'achar zman. That we don't view tomorrow as a literal tomorrow. There is no literal tomorrow. The machar of Yiddishkeit is always measured in much more. And we look through the greater lens of Jewish history. So, one generation, 2 generations even, it's short. It doesn't say the story. To really understand the story, you can only look at it with a machar shuhu la'achar zman, the way that the Chacham is able to understand. And Moshe Rabbeinu, in his response, to shift just one point, it's not that Yiddishkeit is only about the future. That's not the right response. It's not only b'nareinu neilech that we're doing this for our kids. Because there are many perspectives in life where we say, I'm doing it for the children, and everything that I didn't have, but I want my kids to have better. And there's a beauty in that. There's no 100% beauty, something very strong and meaningful in doing something for one's children. But that's not accurately what Moshe says. He doesn't say we're doing it for the kids. He says, b'nareinu b'zikneinu neilech. That we might be missing the main generation. We might be missing the current, the present, the strength, everyone who's in the army, the 20 to 60. But we have the older generation together with the younger generation. And if you can mix and match the grandparents with the grandchildren, then you know you're in good shape. Sometimes you could be missing the entire strength of the people. But if the grandchildren understand what their grandparents understood, and they together go into Eretz Yisrael, so then Klal Yisrael is going to be okay. It's going to work out. This lesson is so pronounced in Parshas Ha'azinu. We see that the Torah cares much on understanding of what the Jewish history will be about. The pasuk says, "Sha'al levicha v'yagedcha zekenecha v'yoymeru lach." The pasuk says that if you want to understand it, so ask your father, "Sha'al levicha v'yagedcha." Your father will be magid. He will relate to you what it's all about. Zekenecha, you will ask your grandfather, v'yoymeru lach, and they will say it to you. So the question in the language of the pasuk is, what is the difference between lahagid and lemor? When it talks about one's father, it says, Sha'al avicha v'yagedcha, to relate it, milashon lahagid. But when we speak about the grandfather, zekenecha, so then a different language is used. We say v'yomeru lach. What's the difference between v'yomeru lach and lahagid? What is the difference between those languages? So we find in Parshas Yisro that when Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Klal Yisrael about Matan Torah, the pasuk says, Ko somar lebeis Yaakov v'saged lebnei Yisrael. Those same two synonyms are used there as well. When it's to the women of Klal Yisrael, lebeis Yaakov, it's somar. Rashi there comments, somar is milashon oraka. It is a softer tone. It is more palatable, relatable, manageable. That's the lashon of amira, ko somar lebeis Yaakov. But when Moshe Rabbeinu was instructing the man, it's saged lebnei Yisrael, to say it in a harsher, more of a decree. This is what it is. So if we borrow that insight from Rashi in Parshas Yisro and the difference between somar and lahagid, then we can apply it back in the pasuk in Parshas Ha'azinu as follows. Sha'al avicha, if one asks their father, v'yagedcha. So then the Yiddishkeit is a decree. It's said harshly. This is what it is. This is your reality, and accept it. That's the language between a father and son. But when it comes to zekenecha, when it comes to the answer that the grandfather gives, so it's v'yoymeru lach, then it's softer, it's more manageable, and the grandchild is able to relate to it in a completely different way. There's a beautiful connection between the grandparents and grandchildren, which the distance is able to provide. And that's exactly what the Torah is saying. Don't stop and think that the story is between parents and children. That is short-sighted. To really get it, to allow the grandchildren to flourish, so then it's zekenecha v'yoymeru lach. If the grandparent is able to be there, so then v'yoymeru lach, it will come out in a softer tone, in one that will be much more manageable. At the Pesach Seder, when we say v'hisha amda lavoseinu, we all together say, Elo shebechol dar v'dar umdim aleinu l'chaloseinu, that in each and every generation, the Goyim wish to destroy us. And there's a beautiful diak in the language. We say, b'chol dar, in every generation, vadar, and generation. And that language, vadar, seems to be superfluous. We could simply say, b'chol dar, in every generation, omdim aleinu l'chaloseinu, the Goyim wish to destroy us. Why do we say, shebechol dar, vadar, in every generation, and generation? Perhaps the meaning is exactly what we're talking about. In every generation means the short-sighted way of looking at Yiddishkeit, seeing what's happening to us right now and seeing the present moment. B'chol dar eindim aleinu l'chaloseinu. In every generation they want to destroy us. But that's not the depth of the story. The depth of the story is shebechol dar vadar, that there's a continuity, that there's a theme which brings us together. It enjoins two generations together and hopefully the three generations together, in understanding that the struggle of their generation is mixed together with the struggle of her previous generation. It is not just that there is constance in Judaism and every dar someone will come to destroy you, but that there's a blend. The battle that you are fighting is precisely the same battle that your grandparents fought. There's a b'chol dar vadar, and only when we see that vav hamachaber, when we see that vav which brings together the continuity between generations, only then can we appreciate that we're all fighting for the same cause. Binoreinu biziknenu nelech. And even when things cut us off, and we only have two people in the middle generation, we still see it all coming together. In a hopeful, optimistic note as well, when we speak about the praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have the same language. We say, Dar lidar yishabach ma'asecha. L'dor vador nagid godlecha. It is not just that in every generation we are praising God. It is more than that. It is that we see that our praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu for what He does to me today is the same way that I want my grandchildren to be doing the same thing. It's the blend of the generations, the way that they come together. So this Pesach, instead of just realizing how grateful we are to be free, it's so important to realize who we are. Not just that we're grateful that we're not in Mitzrayim, but to understand who is it that left Mitzrayim. Mi v'mi aholchim, who has left? And what have we done with it? And what is the point of it all? And to understand the strength and conviction in Moshe Rabbeinu's words, Binu reinu b'ziknenu nelech, that Yiddishkeit is the Messiah of our grandparents and the future generations. When those come together, when those click and sit at a Seder together, then we are guaranteed and have haftacha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that Yiddishkeit will continue and strengthen as time goes on.
Hi, this is Peretz Baruch Eichler, a proud alumnus of Ohr Somayach. Now what you just watched is one of the many programs that Ohr Somayach provides, leaving its impact on hundreds of thousands with so many more waiting to be reached. Ohr Somayach's central campus in Jerusalem has over 300 students presently learning there. And now you can be a vital part of spreading that bounty of knowledge worldwide by logging on to donate.ohr.edu. We can step up to the plate at this pivotal moment of Ohr Somayach's growth and bring the next generation of Jews home.